I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and future. My name is Adam Ost. I'm joined by a group of panelists, including Dr. Natalia Igorova-Brumley, Associate Professor Cassie Hayward, and Dr. Margaret Osborne. I'm going to begin with a presentation on the fourth year program, and then I'll hand it over to my panelists to introduce the master's programs. See if I can. Okay. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'll begin with the fourth year information, which I'm going to be talking about right now, and then we will. I'll hand it over to some panelists to discuss the Master of Biomedical Science, the Master of Applied Psychology, and the Master of Professional Psychology programs. We will have questions for each of these. And I'd also like to mention that there is a Q&A function on the virtual events portal. So we will dedicate time to answer your questions. We'll do our best to get through as many as you can. You can also, if somebody else has already asked your question, you can upvote that question. And so I'd strongly recommend that because that will make it more likely that that question will be answered. Also, recording this session will be available. There will be an email that goes out tomorrow about that. I want to begin by talking about why do honors at University of Melbourne? Because you have choices available to you. One of the biggest reasons is research excellence. So we have some of the top researchers in Australia, including also some of the top researchers in the world. The psychology department at University of Melbourne consistently ranks in the top 50 in the world. So there are some really excellent researchers here. There's also a high grant success rate. So there is also plenty of funding available to do cutting edge research. And finally, there's also external supervision opportunities, which is pretty unique. So that means that there are researchers from other departments who are able to advertise their projects, all of which have an internal supervisor, co-supervisor. But there are opportunities to work with people from other departments to do interdisciplinary work. The honors program consists of research-led coursework curriculum, and it also leads to strong preparation for future career and in research and also in other forms of practice like clinical practice. The honors year is a transitional year on the way to becoming an independent researcher or a practitioner, or possibly both. It involves an academic research apprenticeship that involves a semi-autonomous research project along with one-on-one work with an academic expert. There's also advanced coursework and electives. I'll be talking about some of those shortly. And one of the things I'd like to emphasize is that this is really much more like a postgraduate degree than undergraduate. And for that reason, it can be a little bit more intense than the undergraduate experience. The program consists really of only three things. It's quite simple in that respect. The biggest part of it is the research project, which is compulsory. It's also supervised by at least one supervisor, sometimes multiple supervisors. That is composed of an empirical thesis, which is worth 50 of the 100 points. And it is also a year long. Then there's also two compulsory subjects that are in semester one for a total of 25 credit points, and two elective subjects in semester two for a total of 25 credit points. The research project is, if you've been following the math of this so far, is 50% of the assessment. So as I mentioned, students will have at least one supervisor, sometimes multiple supervisors. Students are matched to supervisors automatically using a ranking system. So all admitted students rank their preferences for supervisors. So all the projects will be supplied to the students. And students have the options of ranking, I believe in this past year was as many as 9 projects. And we have a matching system in place, and particularly we have an algorithm in place to do this. And this is to make sure that we have an equitable process for supervisor selection, to make sure is that students can get assigned to supervisors that they prefer and work on projects they want to work on. or at least get one of the projects that they're interested in. The thesis is submitted as 2 documents. There is a 3,000 word introduction that is it's a draft introduction that's due in July. This is a hurdle requirement, so it's not graded. And then finally, there is a 9,000 word empirical report due in October, which is a 100% weighting. Here's just a few potential titles or titles from some past theses. So for instance, high achievers, cognitive enhancement, drug use in an Australian university context. Is acting extroverted good for you? An intervention study. The influence of daily stress on disordered eating, effects of negative emotions on deontological and utilitarian inclinations, and the impact of a micronature experience on sustained attention, performance, and arousal. So these are some past projects. You can see that there's quite a range of them, and you'll see an even bigger range if you decide to do honors with us. There are projects that range from the clinical to the cognitive to the applied to even qualitative work. There's a whole range of research projects that are available. The compulsory subjects are in semester 1. There are 2 such subjects that are worth 12.5 credit points each. There's advanced data and data analysis. Advanced design and data analysis. I should know the title better because I teach into this subject, which is an introduction to multivariate statistics. It's quite a bit more advanced than the undergraduate courses. And then there's ethics and evidence-based practice, which involves the research ethics, the scientist practitioner framework, and pre-professional skills. There are also elective subjects available in semester 2. So there are 2 subjects that can be selected from a total of 4 subjects. These include developmental psychology, behavioral and cognitive neuroscience, and social psychology and models of psychological processes. These focus on emerging research, and involve sometimes small group seminars and critical discussion. As for the intake and prerequisites, there's around 100 places, give or take a few here and there from year to year. The reason why I can't give a definite estimate is this is subject to supervisor availability each year. There's a very good number of places each year that are taken up by external applicants, so it is not the case that it is taken up entirely of UniMelb students. There are quite a few students that come from other universities. The requirements are an APAC accredited 3-year psychology sequence and a completed undergraduate degree. As for the selection criteria, this is entirely based on academic performance. So it's hard to say. I can't give any definites on the any specifics on the statistics, but typically an entry score of at least 80 will generally be considered competitive for selection consideration. And the weighting is based on 2nd and 3rd year psychology marks. The 2nd year is weighted at about 1/3, and the 3rd year is weighted 2/3. Now, one question we often get is, what is the difference between honors versus the graduate diploma advanced? The answer is that they are almost entirely the same. So there's no difference in either the selection or the standards. There's no separate streams. So students attend the same, or not only do the same courses, but even attend the same classes and things like that, and attend the same orientation. Both programs are APAC accredited. Both are equivalent for progress to higher degrees. So essentially, there is pretty much no difference between them. So this it's really more of in terms of certain standards. So for instance, the main reason why you would want to apply for the Grad Dip Advanced is if you've completed a Grad Dip, or if your BA is greater than 5 years old, your BSc is greater than 10 years old, or your degree is in something other than arts or science, or you wish to apply for graduate access. So those are the reasons why you might want to consider applying for the GDA. Other information about the program: there are no deferred places. There's also no mid-year entry, so that means you have to apply at the same time, check the application dates, and apply for the 1st or 2nd intake rounds. All local places are CSP based. Part-time study is possible, but we would like to emphasize that all classes are scheduled during working hours. For more information, consider look at the links on the page. Applications are made via the University of Melbourne online application system, accessible via the university homepage. Applications close on the 20th of October, 2023. So you want to submit final results by 24th of November, 2023 to be considered for round one. The round one offers are sent out around mid-December. If you want to be considered for round two, you want to submit your final results by the 5th of January, 2024, and the round two offers will be sent around January 2024. The orientation, it will be on Thursday, the 22nd of February, 2024, and classes start on Friday, February 23rd, 2024, which is just basically one business day before the start of semester, because that's where there will be an intensive day for the stats subject. For more information, please look at our website listed here, and hope to see you in 2024. And now I have time to field some questions. Let's see, I need to stop sharing. So yeah, please hit me up with some questions. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Oh, here we go. Are any factors other than one's WAM and competing undergraduate psychology major taken into account when applying for an honors place at UniMelb? There are no other factors that go into consideration. So it is entirely based on WAM. I also would like to introduce our student speaker, Daniel Hutchinson. Dan, can you unmute yourself?
Hi.
First, can you just introduce yourself and mention what your position is currently?
Sure. So I'm Dan. I'm currently 6 months into a PhD under Dr. Ost and also Associate Professor Dan Little. So for my 4th year, I did a project with the same 2 supervisors in cognitive psychology. And before that, I did undergrad science at Melbourne, majoring in psychology. I chose Melbourne because the honours topics available for me were very interesting to me. Highlights for the 4th year program for me was the breadth and depth of subjects that were available. I ended up choosing subjects that could give me quite an in-depth focus on a couple of things that were relevant to both my research, but also my interests in cognitive modeling, but also I did like a broader topics in subject, which gave more of like a view of the landscape in a certain field. So I just felt like after undergrad, it's interesting to finally be learning sort of current ideas rather than sort of generally being about 20 years in the past.
Cool. And what made you decide to choose honors here?
So a couple of reasons. Obviously, like many students, I applied to lots of places to do the honours year. It's just the realistic way that these things go. But given that I had a few options, one of the reasons I chose Melbourne was the breadth of the different topics for the projects. And also, I hadn't decided whether I was still considering doing a clinical master's in the future. And Melbourne has a really good program for that and gives you a good setup to go that direction later, if you're interested in it.
Great, thank you. I've got a couple more questions that I'm just going to field. In the meantime, you can also, for those in the audience, you are also able to ask questions of Dan. So they can be directed to either Dan or myself, but I'll just go through a couple of these questions really fast. How can I decide between a Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, or Bachelor of Biomedicine in honors psychology? Are they the same? This just depends on, in terms of the honors, it really just depends on what your degree was in the first place. So that it's really kind of pretty straightforward. Just whatever your degree was will end up being your degree. What kind of research opportunities are available? A wide range of research opportunities are available. So, for instance, there are a number of clinical projects. There are a number of cognitive projects that are devoted to understanding, for instance, like learning and memory or language or that kind of thing. There's also research in social psychology, which is understanding, attitudes and things like that, and how people are affected by others. There's also personality psychology work. There's neuroscience work. There's probably even missing some things here, but really just anything you can think of that's associated with psychology. There are research projects available for pretty much all branches in psychology. So a pretty wide range of projects. In terms of the specific projects that are offered, it really just depends on what projects the supervisors are offering. So you will be given a description of the research project and some details and maybe even some readings available. Yeah. For the 3-year APEC sequence, do the 3 years need to have been studied full time? I believe as long as the sequence is completed, I don't believe it really matters whether it was full time or part time. And I think that's it. Are there any questions for Dan? Oh, here's a question for me. How to find information about current research projects and interests that we could join or work close to in honors. The research projects won't be advertised until around December. And those go out with the current, if you've been admitted to the program. We don't really advertise the full list of research projects publicly. If you want to get a sense of the kinds of things that people work on, you can always take a look at the current research academics, take a look at their publications and things like that. Many researchers within the school tend to advertise projects that are fairly close to what they normally work on. Is it necessary to finish a master's degree before proceeding to a PhD in psychology? No, it is not. So you can proceed to a PhD after having completed an honors, but you do need to complete, at least for the RHD program, you do need to complete honors in order to do a PhD. So I can't speak for some of the other PhD programs. Are there any placement or internship opportunities during the 4th year of psychology? What kind of job prospects are available after completing the 4th year of psychology? There are sometimes some internship opportunities that are available. I would generally consider doing those after the 4th year or before it. The 4th year is quite an intense program. It's generally recommended, for instance, if you are doing a full-time degree, it is generally, you should be expecting to do about 40 hours of work. There might be a small amount of time. So like, for instance, one question we often get is whether students can work a job in addition to doing their 4th year. And generally the recommendation we give is to try to consider only working about 8 hours max on top of that. So if you were to be doing something like an internship, try to keep it such that it doesn't interfere too much with your studies. But my general recommendation would be to consider doing something like an internship after the 4th year. The website says there are mid-year intakes for honors, but I'm not sure where on the website it says that, but we don't have a mid-year intake. So I'm not really sure where it mentions that. Question, here's finally a question for Dan. Where else did you apply and why?
So I actually applied to most of the universities that offered honors in Melbourne, and a couple I applied to Canberra and Sydney as well. I didn't really consider international, but that's sort of a personal thing about, my living situation and things like that. I think for a lot of people, myself included, the main thing is that a lot of people are sitting right around that entry score mark, and different universities they consider those marks slightly differently. Some people will get offered places in one uni and not another, and it's not always particularly consistent as to why. The Melbourne process is fairly straightforward. It's advertised exactly how it works, but you don't know exactly where the cutoff is going to be every year. And I knew that I was right around that mark where it could have gone either way. That's the honest answer for you there.
Thanks, Dan. Another question for me is, what was the lowest WAM offered a place in honors last year? We don't really disclose the WAM results, so I'm not able to actually give that information. So I just would like to reiterate that, you should really consider, marks of around 80 and above to be competitive. Any other questions? We still have another 10 minutes or so. Oh, no more questions. So we are running ahead of time. I would like to actually introduce the next speaker, which is Dr. Natalia Igorova-Brumley. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Thank you. Let me just run the presentation. Okay. I hope everyone can see the slides. So I'm going to talk to you about the Master of Biomedical Science, and it is a master's program that is running across the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences, and you can take it as within the Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences. So it's a 2-year full-time graduate program of research and coursework, and you started following an undergraduate science degree. The difference with the honors that Adam has just described is that you do not need a psychology background to start it, but just an interest in psychology and fit with the supervisor who would be offering a particular project that you'd be interested in. So you can go either straight into employment or do a PhD after you complete the Masters of Biomedical Science. So the programs are similar in that both have similar entry requirements, although I'll let you know a little bit more about this later. But they are primarily focused on research projects. The difference is that the Master of Biomedical Science is a 2-year program, and it is important to keep in mind that it does not allow the professional track in psychology. So it is research in psychology if you are interested in pursuing research in psychology, but you cannot do a clinical psychology program. Okay, so it is about twice the length, and there is quite a bit of flexibility in what you can take. So you can have the core subjects, electives, and the research project is growing with as you go progress along the program. So what are you likely to do? You will work closely with a senior researcher and their research group. So you'll learn advanced research techniques and processes. You'll gain some advanced knowledge in this particular discipline. And this will prepare you to either pursue a PhD in psychology, even if your previous background was not necessarily in psychology, and offer you some employment opportunities. And what benefits does the program offer? You gain an understanding of the research process, and you gain some special knowledge about the specific project that you're working in, and some professional skills in research. But importantly, it also gives you some skills in time, project management, teamwork, communication, advanced problem solving, which are all attractive to employers. The examples of employment options following this program would be in research and development, health care, policy, services delivery, educational sector, and health sector management. In terms of the course structure, as I mentioned, there are core subjects, electives, and research project, which takes up the 125 points. So it's the substantial portion of this program. And there is quite a bit of flexibility. You can start in the year and take both compulsory subjects first and then add electives, or you can choose to start mid-year and then do the program differently. So there is quite a bit of flexibility. And the only two core subjects are the Introduction to Biomedical Research, which introduces structured approach to strategies at the core of modern biomedical research. And the other core subject is in Biomedical Enterprise Research to Impact, which offers students a foundation in developing in biomedical research discovery into a new therapeutic approach. Okay, so you choose at least 2 discipline electives and at least 1 industry and professional elective. And then the remaining electives can be from either list, and I'll show you a few examples. So there are lots of different programs, but perhaps for the psychology, the exploring neural circuits and systems and advanced biomolecular neuroscience could be the most relevant. In terms of the professional electives, you have statistics for research workers, or commercialization of science, or scientist communication in the workplace. So there are a few courses that could be directly relevant to the track in psychology. So as I mentioned, the most important component is the project. And obviously for this particular presentation, what's relevant is that you can take it in the School of Psychological Sciences. So the benefit is, of course, that you are within the biomedical precinct. So you have access to scanners, if it's neuroscience, for clinical placement, so you can conduct projects that are quite clinically relevant. But as I said, it's really important to emphasize that you cannot go into professional psychology after this degree. In terms of eligibility, it's slightly perhaps easier to get in that you require the at least H3 or equivalent to be admitted, and you need to demonstrate proficiency in the English language. However, I must say that this eligibility criteria are not a guarantee of selection. So the most important is that you find a particular project or a supervisor who would be willing to supervise you into this program. The way it works, if you come from a non-psychology degree, is that you find the supervisor who's happy with your previous track record and previous experience and background, and then myself or somebody in the psychology department looks at your transcript to understand whether you'd be able to complete the program given the psychology knowledge that you typically would require to do a research project in psychology. So it is quite flexible, and the eligibility is quite less strict. So as long as you want to pursue a research project in psychology and perhaps switching to psychology, this could be a good pathway for you. But I reiterate that you cannot become a clinical psychologist and continue in this professional pathway. So if you want to know more, you can go online on the website where it's described quite in detail. And you can take a look at the flyer that has been prepared. So if you follow this QR code, and if you have any more questions, I'm happy to answer those, but please let us know if you need any clarifications or any other information. We'll be happy to show you more. So I'll stop sharing now, and I don't think I get question time, so I'll introduce the next speaker, who's Associate Professor Cassie Hayward. Kate, Cassie.
Hello, thank you. So many great opportunities for our third year students. I love attending these sessions to have a look. I'm going to tell you about another option after third year, which is the Master of Applied Psychology. So let me just share my screen. Hopefully that's all working. Okay, let's go. Oh, a bit dramatic there, sorry. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the Master of Applied Psychology, and then you'll hear from one of our grads, Amy, who's with us tonight. And then I'll give you the sort of contact details and next steps and any questions that we can answer for you. The Master of Applied Psychology, it's a pretty new program. So our first intake was in 2018. So it's not as new as the Master of Professional Psychology, which is next up on the list, but still a pretty new program. And what we try to do in the Master of Applied Psychology is prepare you for diverse degrees that draw on an understanding of psychology and human behaviour, but not in a clinical setting. So again, this is not a clinically trained, you won't end up being a clinical psychologist after this program. You will be very attractive to employers who work in these applied settings though. One of our key kind of ways that we teach in the Master of Applied Psychology though is you still learn theory. There's a lot of stuff that you learn, but there's a really strong emphasis on how to put that theory into action. At the moment, I can still say there's no other course like it in Australia. There are a few in the UK and the US. One thing I want to make clear is this is not a Masters of Organisational Psychology. So there are some programs in Australia that do a Masters of Organisational Psychology that's very different to this. So that's about kind of selection and testing and HR and more focused on kind of psychology within particular workplace practices. This is very different, and I'll show you the subjects which will outline some of the differences between organisational and what we do in the Master of Applied Psychology. Important again to keep in mind, it doesn't give you professional registration as a psychologist, but what the careers that it sets you up for, that doesn't provide a barrier to either entry to those careers or progression. We've had, even from our graduates from our first and second cohort, they've already kind of found great jobs and been promoted multiple times. So it's a really attractive degree for employers, and I'll show you some career path options shortly. Most of the subjects that you do are just for MAP. Some you share with MPP and one you share with the honours students. You do a couple of subjects down through the Faculty of Business and Economics, which give you that kind of breadth of knowledge in that faculty. But most of the subjects are just here in MSPS and just for MAP students or MAP and MPP students. We have a really strong focus on having industry guests. So most of your subjects will have at least one or two industry guests as part of the subject, so that you can see how people are actually applying what you're learning in that subject to an actual workplace. You can enter the MAP directly from your undergrad degree. As long as you have that major in psychology, you can come straight into the MAP. Just an overview of our structure. It's 3 semesters full-time, so it's 150 points. We don't have a mid-year entry, so that you start at the beginning of the year. What that often means for our grads is when you finish at the end of semester 1 in your second year, which can actually be advantageous for employability. It kind of, if you are looking for a job at the time before the kind of end of year students are starting to look for work, so it can be an advantage in terms of finishing at that point. Some students take that rest of the year as a little holiday and start work in the following year as well. But just to let you know that it's 3 semesters full time. As long as you have that undergrad in psychology, again, like Adam said, we don't release the specific kind of cutoff, but thinking of a WAM around 75, 76 and above will put you in a competitive, although not guaranteed, position. The mark calculation is exactly the same as honours, so it's based on those second and third year psychology subjects, with the second year giving double weight. So exactly the same formula that Adam put up for honours WAM calculation is the same calculation that we use. Cohort size is around 40 to 45, typically face-to-face. So some of those Faculty of Business and Economics subjects have an option for you to watch online or do it online, but the psych code subjects are all back to fully face-to-face, which is great. We're mostly full fee. We have about 5 CSP and 10 scholarships, which I'll go through in a moment. And most of our grads go to full-time employment, but you can go onto a research higher degree from the MAP, which Amy will also talk about. As I briefly mentioned then, there are some CSP and scholarship places. You don't have to do anything in particular to apply for these. You'll be automatically considered for both CSP and scholarships on application to the MAP. Selection is based purely on academic merit, but you don't have to do anything else other than apply for the MAP to be considered for these CSP or scholarship places. Quick overview of the structure. You can do the MAP part-time, but this is the structure if you do it full-time. We don't have a mid-year entry, but you can start in semester 1 and spread it out full-time. We do have some students who do just spread it out so that it takes 2 years, so not fully part-time, but not fully full-time, if that makes sense. So you have a bit of flexibility in that. The one thing I'll point out though is for all the dark blue subjects, they are only offered in the semester that they're offered here. So if you are spreading it out outside of this full-time structure, just be aware that you are limited in terms of when you can do those specific subjects. They're not offered in both semesters. Semester 1, you'll do the advanced design and data analysis with the honours students. Then you'll do advanced social psychology and psychology of advertising just with your MAP students. And you get to choose one of these marketing subjects, either consumers and consumption or marketing management, down at Faculty of Business and Economics. In your second year, you will do attitude and behaviour change and applied research methods shared with the MPP students. And then one important thing to keep in mind, so if you're looking at our study plan online, you will see that there are different subjects here in semester 2. So as of next year, we have 2 new subjects that are our own psychology subjects, principles of consulting and qualitative methods in psychology. They are replacing subjects that we used to kind of outsource to FBE and Melbourne School of Global Population Health. So if you are looking at this page and thinking, hey, that looks different to what I've seen online, that's why. So we now have our own subject that focuses on consulting and our own subject that focuses on qualitative methods, and they will replace those FBE and population global health subjects. In the third semester, you do 2 subjects just with MAP students, thinking, judgment, decision making, influence and persuasion, and then you either do an internship or a research project, which I'll take you through in a moment. Just a quick overview of the subjects. Adam's already talked about this subject, so I won't go into detail on that. Advanced social psychology looks at the practical applications of social psychology in groups, in leadership, morality, and other applied places like that. Psychology of advertising is with me, so we look at focusing on crafting effective advertising and other communication messages. It's not just about selling stuff. We mostly focus on the kind of use of advertising in selling, say, health benefits or behaviour change campaigns. We look at using social media, all those sorts of tools. So it's an interesting subject, looking at how we can persuade people through advertising. And then you can choose one of these subjects, either consumers and consumption or marketing management. And they're both great. They just have a slightly different kind of angle in terms of what they focus on. Most of our students say that if you have done, if you've kind of done any marketing as your breadth subjects in your undergrad, probably do the marketing management subject. But if you want more of a basic kind of consumer behavior subject, do consumers and consumption. But we get great feedback from both. The difference here, so our MAP subjects, the psych code subjects, are small group kind of seminar style. And when you go down to FBE to these MKTG code subjects, they're larger groups. So that's a kind of more traditional big lecture theatre style subject, whereas our MAP subjects are sort of seminar style, 40-ish students. Semester 2, attitude and behaviour change, where we look at the science of attitude and behaviour in health and other real-world contexts. Applied research methods, where we look at a whole range of different methodologies appropriate for applied social research, covering survey design, focus groups, big data, data analysis, user experience, all sorts of different methods. Principles of consulting, which will be our new subject next year, where we look at the technical skills required for consulting, specifically focused on the careers for MAP grads. So the subject that this is replacing still taught the same skills, but with a broader kind of business focus. We can focus in on those careers that we know that our MAP grads go into. Qualitative methods in psychology, looking at applied qualitative research skills development. Semester 3, we look at influence and persuasion, where we look at social influence, communication design, understanding the unpersuadable. So think anti-vaxxers, flat earthers, those types of groups, social norms, negotiation, all sorts of different fun topics. That's with me again. Thinking, judgment, decision making, looking at the science and application of decision theory, some neuroscience elements, heuristics and biases in our decision making. Then you either do a 20-day industry internship with one of our partner organisations, I'll show you a few examples in a moment, or you do an applied research project. This is still with a partner, an industry partner, but it's more like a mini honours project than an internship where you're working in the organisation. With the internship, it's 20 full-time days. And you can either do that in a full-time kind of 4-week period before semester starts. So some of our students and our hosts like having that kind of full-time February experience where you're kind of working full-time Monday to Friday for 4 weeks, which can be a bit of a shock after a more relaxed summer break. Or you can do it spread out over your final semester. So in your final semester, you might, with your host, decide that 2 or 3 days a week for 7 to 8 weeks of that semester 1 is a better way to spread your internship out. These are some example host organisations, and this also represents the types of careers that our grads typically go into. So some go into advertising and marketing, and again, some of these are traditional advertising agencies, but many also focus on behaviour change, work with kind of clients like TAC, who is another host. So a lot of these advertising and marketing agencies are kind of trying to sell positive behaviour change as well as just selling stuff. Behavioural insights and change. So we've got people like the TAC and the Cancer Council, who you've probably heard of, big advertisers in Australia, in Victoria, in terms of trying to enact good social behaviour change. And then we have some behavioural teams as well, behavioural insights team, behavioural insights unit within the Victorian government, and a research agency, Behavioural Architects, focused on behaviour change. We also have a lot of market and social research agencies who take interns. And I guess the newer element in our internships is looking at user experience. So this is using your psychology and research to understand how people interact with technology and apps and websites, and optimizing those experiences. I'm not going to play this video just in the interests of time. I don't want to ruin our record of actually being on time for one of these things, but I will. The link is on the study page. The video is on the study page, and we'll also distribute this link when we distribute the slides from tonight. There's the video. If you don't do the internship, you can choose to do the research project. One reason why you would perhaps choose to do a research project instead of an internship is this gives you a clearer path into a PhD. So if you know coming into the MAP that you would like to do a PhD, the best advice we can give you is to choose the research project rather than the internship. It's not saying that you won't get into a PhD if you've done the internship, but doing the research project gives the PhD selection committee just some better data in terms of how you've coped with mostly individual research project. You do this in groups, but you write it up by yourself. It is with partner organisations. So these are some that we've worked with before. Cancer Council, for example, looking at how the marketing of using things like all natural or other health the quote unquote benefits on drinks can have an impact on how people consume these drinks. We look at perceptions of ovarian cancer and the risks. So really kind of applied topics, and all working with a partner organisation. They are really fast turnaround. So you only have 1 semester to do this, and we typically do some type of general population survey or data collection as well. So you have to work really fast. The write-up isn't as big as an honours project, but it's a tight turnaround timeline for doing these projects. But our students really like doing them. Amy, who you'll meet in a moment, did the research project pathway, so she can tell you a little bit about that as well. Most of our grads go directly to employment. So I just had a look. We have a LinkedIn group of our MAP students and grads and our hosts. So I just had a quick look about where some of our grads are, and the spread of organisations and government departments that our grads go into is reflected in our internship. So it is kind of not surprising that they end up in all these varied locations, given that the MAP does give you that flexibility to choose where you would like to take it. So whether you want to go into government policy or advertising or behaviour change or research, you can kind of choose where to take your where to take the MAP. Some go into a PhD, so some have gone onto a PhD overseas, but we have Anne and Amy who've gone onto a PhD here at Melbourne. You'll meet Amy very, very shortly. And I've just got some details there in terms of how to apply. So again, you'll have these links. Same timeline in terms of when classes start and the orientation as Adam went through with the honours. And just keeping in mind that our applications close on November 29, 2023. If you want to be considered for a CSP or a scholarship, there is another round of offers, so you can put in an application after that. But if you get your application in after November 29, you can't be considered for the CSP or scholarship place. Different questions. If you've got questions specifically about the course content, you can get in touch with me. More admin-y type questions, you can contact that postgrad site. But I'm going to hand over to Amy, so I'll stop sharing my screen and hand over to Amy, who's one of our brilliant grads, who I drag into these events to showcase how brilliant our grads are. But Amy, could you just give us a little overview of your experience in the MAP?
Yeah, of course. So hi, everyone. My name is Amy, and I graduated from the MAP in 2022, and I'm currently pursuing a PhD in social psychology at Uni Melb. My Wi-Fi, I will warn, is a little bit spotty, so hopefully it doesn't cut me out, but just a pre-warning in case. Yeah, so thank you to Cassie and Isla for inviting me to speak a little bit about my experiences during the MAP and also some of the decision-making that went into applying for the program. Which hopefully can help you all in your decision-making as well. So maybe we'll start from the beginning. When I finished my bachelor's in 2016, I knew that I really loved psychology, but I couldn't really picture myself pursuing a clinical pathway or academic research for the matter at the time. I therefore left psychology behind for a few years. But when I left my job at the start of the pandemic, I was really eager to take a deeper dive into human behavior, and especially our behavior as citizens and as members of society. And so when I found the MAP, I was really excited because I knew that that was exactly what I was looking for. And it was such a rare program, especially within Australia. Through the course, I was really able to refine my knowledge of human behavior and decision-making, but also develop a lot of practical skills in problem-solving, research, and collaboration. I think the MAP did an excellent job providing me with, yes, key theoretical knowledge that's necessary to apply psychology to a variety of real-world problems, but it also helped me to develop skills that I can take to any workplace, whether that's in industry, like many of my peers, or in my case, in academia. As I mentioned earlier, I graduated in 2022, so I completed the course really during the peak of the pandemic, when we were going in and out of lockdowns. And completing our coursework within that context really highlighted for me the practical applications of what we were learning in the classroom. I think Cassie and Isla did a really great job designing the coursework so that you're constantly drawing parallels between what you're learning in class and real social problems that we face as a society. For example, at the start of Australia's vaccine rollout, which feels like a really long time ago now, we had an assignment in our Psych of Advertising class with Cassie, where we were asked to design a hypothetical advertising campaign that used behavior change theories and influence and persuasion principles to promote vaccine uptake. So it was really clear then the applications of what we were learning. In general, I found that the course content was really engaging because we were constantly challenged to think about how we could apply what we were learning to different social issues. So, for example, some of the issues that we talked about in our coursework included the growing threat of misinformation and conspiracy theories, diversity and inclusion in the workforce, and also gender inequality. And during my last semester, I had the opportunity to bring a lot of those issues together in a research project that I completed in partnership with the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence. So it was one of the projects that was displayed on that page that Cassie just presented. And my project focused specifically on youth disadvantage during the COVID-19 pandemic. So again, an opportunity to take sort of the theory and knowledge that we were learning in the classroom and applying it to the social issue that was really relevant and pertinent at the time. Beyond the coursework, I think a major highlight for me was hearing from a variety of industry guests, including researchers at the Cancer Council and at Origin, managing partners at advertising firms, and also design researchers who focus on user and customer experience. Hearing from these speakers really reinforced the fact that the skills that we develop during the MAP are broadly applicable across a range of industries. And, each of the guests really emphasized how in demand our skill set was. I realized that there were so many career opportunities that I hadn't previously considered. And it was really tempting for me to actually enter industry. But I eventually decided to pursue a PhD because I was so keen to further explore some of the social problems that we discussed during the MAP. So I'm actually doing my PhD research project on the relationship between moralistic thinking and polarization in society. That being said, I still finished the course feeling as though there were so many doors that have been opened. And I think the different pathways that my peers have taken since graduating really attest to that. A final point, I'd just like to say that the MAP has really grown into a relatively sizable and very supportive community. So even though I completed large chunks of the degree from home because of lockdown restrictions, I don't think there's ever been a time during my academic journey where I felt more supported by the people that I was engaging with. Whether it was Cassie and Isla or my classmates, professors, or even other MAP grads, everyone was incredibly approachable and really quick to lend a helping hand. And I got the sense that people were really invested in my success, which made me even more motivated to make the most out of my MAP experience. All in all, I'd say that the MAP was a really great experience. I'd even say life-changing, actually, and I highly recommend the course to anybody who wants to learn more about applied research, human behavior and behavior change, decision-making, and social psychology, and anybody who's keen to develop, stronger research skills as well. So thank you.
Oh, Amy, thank you for that. I promise I don't tell Amy what to say, but that was such a nice reflection, and it's so nice to hear. I've got some questions. Also, if you have any questions for Amy, put them in there, but I'll just answer the questions that have come up in general for the MAP. The first one, what are the main areas of specialization in the MAP? I think that's kind of covered. We have a big focus on behavior change and kind of public policy and kind of social issues rather than kind of consumer-based issues. But I think that question came up before I started presenting, so hopefully that's been answered. How does the program stay current with the latest trends and advancement in psychology? As Amy said, we're kind of constantly looking at how what we're teaching in the MAP relates to what's going on in society, but also what's going on in psychology. So all the lecturers and professors within the MAP are at the School of Psychological Sciences. So as Adam went through, you've got top researchers who are at the cutting edge of research. So they just bring that to the MAP in terms of how they can apply that cutting edge thinking and research to topics that relate to these applied issues. Can the MAP program be a bridging pathway to being a clinical psychology? No, you would still have to, the only way to be a clinical psychologist is through the accredited programs, the honours into the clinical. Dr. Margaret Osborne will in a moment talk about the MPP, but this is, if you want to be a clinical psychologist, the MAP is not a pathway to get there. Question 4 from an eager student saying, can I do both the research and the internship in the MAP program? We've never had it before. I don't think the university lets you because you'd have to technically overload in your final semester. But we've never had the question put to us from a student, so I can look into it. I don't think the uni lets us overload that because they're both 25-point subjects, so you would be significantly over. But if whoever sent that question, if you can send me an email and I can look into that in more detail. What's the difference between the Master of Applied Psychology and the Master of Positive Applied Psychology? Master of Positive Applied Psychology is not taught through Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences. That's down at Melbourne Graduate School of Education, and it's a completely different kind of area. So we don't do any positive psychology within the MAP, and it's a very different kind of field. So it's a shame that we've got such similar names because we do get confused a little bit. But yeah, it's quite a different kind of field. Is there any way to converse with MAP grads who are in employment about their current type of employment? We only add MAP students and grads to the LinkedIn group, but if you have any specific questions of our grads, I'd be happy to ask them if they would be connected with you. So if you want to email me, my email address is there, or you can find it through the uni pages. Any sort of specific questions you have for grads. As Amy said, it's a really supportive group, and I'm sure I'd be able to find some grads who would be happy to talk to you about any interest that you have in specific career paths. For the MAP CSP selection, CSP selection is based on academic merit. It's as Adam pointed out, all our selection and CSP placement is just based on those WAM scores. So I think that's it for the questions. Amy, did you see any questions in your chat? Peter, if there's anything else for us, pop them in. Okay. Thank you for your attention and interest in the MAP. We'd love to see you next year. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me. But right now I have the pleasure in introducing Dr. Margaret Osborne, who's the convener of the Master of Professional Psychology. So I'll hand over to you. And thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much, Cassie, so much, Amy. Thank you again to my colleagues again for a wonderful suite of degrees we have for you to whet your appetite. Now I'm going to share my screen. And I'm hoping it's looking equally professional for you. So I'm the convener of the Master of Professional Psychology. As Cassie said, it is actually, I think, the graduate. Oh no, the second oldest baby of the school. But the Master of Professional Psychology had its first intake in 2021, and I'm very happy to talk to you about it. This is actually the program in the suite of degrees tonight that does set you up for professional practice and training. So we know that in the psychological workforce, over 60% of practitioners have generalist registration. And, you know, when you graduate from the Master of Psychology programs, equally, you are graduating with a generalist registration. So typically generalists are working with stress, anxiety issues, depression, which can include suicide risk and suicide management, adjustment to life changes, management of grief, and unresolved emotional pain. Generalist psychologists help to motivate people to change their behaviour in order to live in meaningful ways that support their mental health and well-being. We can work with individuals, groups, couples in the community, as well as health, educational, and organisational settings. So really a broad spectrum. So if you're not quite sure, for example, if you want to specialise in a particular area of psychology right now, this is a good opportunity or good path to consider. Generalist psychologists and psychologists who take the Master of Professional Psychology track, followed by an internship, we can, and I say we because I'm a generalist, we provide treatment and see patients and clients under the mental health care scheme, and our patients and clients are able to access Medicare rebates through the delivery of focused psychological strategies. So let me tell you now about our program. It's a combined 4th and 5th year study sequence in the 5+1 pathway. So if we look at APRA and how they demonstrate the pathways to professional psychological training, this falls into the 5+1 pathway. But actually what I'd like you to do is sort of consider stretching that red circle a little, because it's also incorporating a 4th year track. So we have a parallel 4th year at the school, which is the 1st year in the MPP. So as a summary, you've got a 3-year bachelor degree with an accredited major in psychology, you can take the 1-year accredited 4th-year honours program in psychology or the Graduate Diploma Advanced. And then that leads to a 2-year accredited Master of Psychology program in educational psychology, clinical and clinical neuropsychology. And then beyond that, you can consider some research options. So our degree, the Master of Professional Psychology, is a 4th and 5th year combined. It's one of 3 degrees in Australia that is the 2-year, 4th and 5th year combined. And, you know, it is in that sense innovative. Let me take you through 5 aspects to our program. So first of all, it's professional practice. Importantly, you'll be engaged in a range of subjects covering advanced skills pertinent to practicing psychologists. This includes ethical conduct, introduction to the practice of interviewing and counselling skills, history taking and diagnosis and self-care. So, and training in mental state examinations, risk assessment and intervention. You're actually getting that in the 4th year program. So we're fast tracking your clinical skills, and that has been fed back to us from our liaison sessions with our placement providers for our students. That's really coming out as a notable strength for our psychology graduates in the 5+1 program, perhaps compared to other programs that are simply a 5th year on its own on top of an honours program. So furthermore, it delves further into assessment and intervention, so specifically a subject in that, covering psychological interviewing and testing in professional settings, such as the principles of diagnostic decision-making and the logic of clinical inference-making. Widely used tests of symptoms and personality, test administration and interpretation, and so on. You're covering subjects in intervention, so basic interventions, cognitive behaviour therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy as well. You're covering other treatment modalities such as pharmacological and psychosocial where appropriate. And also another sort of innovative element of this degree, considering that we do have the beautiful strengths of the MAP program, for example, we're able to cross over and teach behaviour change. So we have a behaviour change focus here where we consider the nature and structure of attitudes. Essentially what you're doing when you're working with people in clinical practice, you're wanting to change behaviour in terms of their health and their mental health. So it's really important that you develop skills in that area. And of course, well-being. We have a well-being focus in our degree as well. So you undertake a subject in the 1st year, the 1st semester, where you're integrating well-being and clinical practice-related knowledge and experiential learning resources and activities. And it helps you develop an integrated theoretical and practical understanding of well-being and the techniques to improve well-being in clinical practice. Of course, because it's the Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences, we have a strong research program. And in the 1st year, the 4th year, you do a 1-year research project, but it's 25 credit points, so half the weight of the honours research project. You're also taking further study in design and data analysis in methods that enable and support you in the research project. And importantly, these research projects, yes, they're still run by our staff in our school and can also be mapped with external staff in other schools, but principally the most important element here is that they are professionally oriented topics. Okay, so they're also in a small group kind of format. So you work with other students and you have the support of your peers to investigate a particular research area, and each individual writes up a particular research question and hypotheses in relation to that question. But what we found is that it's really supportive for students to be working together in these small groups to interrogate larger data sets that are clinically oriented. For example, a data set from our psychology clinic at the university. So examples of projects include the investigation of the relationship between adverse childhood experiences, toxic stress and resilience, and the impact of video conferencing on body dissatisfaction and the urge to engage in disordered eating, moderated by loneliness, body dissatisfaction, and eating attitudes. They're just 2 examples of many brilliant research projects we've had through the program. Of course, you're going to be learning about psychopathology across the lifespan. So the clinical manifestations, etiology, diagnosis, assessment, and management of high prevalence psychological disorders of childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. There is a lifespan perspective. So also covering the key developmental tasks and transitions at each developmental stage from perinatal to the end of life. And you practice applying that knowledge in clinical case formulation. That is also a real strength in our program. You get a lot of practice in that, and that stands you in good stead when you're doing your placements, your external placements, and your internship in the +1. And plus also individual and cultural diversity. So we're considering always the individual and cultural factors that contribute to the development of psychological disorders. And thinking of clients as a whole person rather than merely focusing on symptoms and diagnosis of disorders. And last but very not least, placement. So in the second year of the MAP, which is the 5th year of your psychology training track, you accumulate 300 hours of placement. So in semester 1, we use a virtual clinic, and we have very intensive role play therapy simulations that are being interrogated with you, with Lisa Catania, our placement coordinator. And it's highly insightful. And then you become very prepared for semester 2, your external placement for 220 hours. So where is that external placement going to be? Well, here are some examples of some sites where our students have been placed. You can see we've got Headspace, we've got public and private high schools, specialist community-based counselling services, such as HIV, LGBTIQ+, refugee and trauma and substance use. We've got older adult wellbeing services and a number of private practices. So what are the subjects you'll be taking? Well, in year 1, the 4th year, you're going to be doubling up with the honours students, understanding about ethics and pre-professional practice and evidence-based practice. You're going to be understanding attitude and behaviour change and learning more about research design and analysis. The green subjects are subjects specifically created for MPP students, so Wellbeing in Practice, Professional Psych Skills 1 and the research project. And the blue there is an overlap to the Master of Psychology clinical program, which then is enhanced in the 2nd year, the 5th year. So the psychopathology in child and adolescents, assessment and diagnosis, the intervention subjects, as I said before, and continuing with professional skill development and placement. You can see that there's an imbalance in the credit points because there's a summer semester that you do, a number of subjects in the summer semester between 1st and 2nd year. So if you're thinking about doing this degree next year, just think at the moment, you know, your credit points will be a little lighter in the 1st year. Perhaps you could take on some extra work, clinically oriented work that would do you in good stead. But in the 2nd year, it is a very intensive year. So really keep that in mind. So if we think about selection and, you know, coming to do the degree, your application, what we really want to know in your 500-word statement is an understanding of any professionally oriented work experience that you've done, any counselling training that really does stand out as a feature in the students, the applicants that we take in. And in the interview, it's your chance to let us get to know you. So in addition to the required marks, we're also keen to hear about the type of work that you've done, why you want to study with us, and why you want to do this course and where you see yourself working, so we can understand how this course aligns with where you want to go. So we start in semester 1, 2024. There is no mid-year entry. There are no deferred places. It's domestic only. It's full-time preferred. We do offer part-time positions or offers on a case-by-case basis, but really students get more being full-time because you stay with the cohort, and then the cohort and your other students and your peers support you, and it's a much more, I think, satisfying experience. We do have Commonwealth supported places and Australian full fee places available. There are more full fee places at the moment that we'd likely be offering. So selection into the degree is by weighted average mark, which at this historically has been in the high 70s. And so it's even, it's topping into the 80 as well. So it is competitive. And importantly, we don't manage the 1-year internship. So this is the 4th and 5th year. So the +1 is managed by yourselves in arrangement, typically with the provider that you're, or the site for your placement. So I think that is all for me now about the program. And in a moment, I'd like to now welcome Sonia Katsavelis. She is one of our first graduating cohorts from the Master of Professional Psychology, actually the first cohort in 2022. So she completed the MPP after studying a Bachelor of Science, majoring in physiology, and the Graduate Diploma in Psychology at the University of Melbourne. Sonia is currently undertaking her +1 internship year at a large private practice in Ringwood. She works primarily with children, adolescents and their families, and has enjoyed working with adults also during her internship year. So I'm going to stop my screen share now. And no, it doesn't look like, there she is. Yes, she is here. Brilliant. Sorry, I was just scanning my files. Excellent. Hello, Sonia.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, welcome. Sonia, I've just introduced you to the group, the brief bio, but I'm wondering now if we could, if I can ask you to answer a couple of questions for me
Sure.
about your experience and your work now. So first of all, could you tell us about why you selected the Master of Professional Psychology?
Yeah, so I was actually in the process of exploring different options for future study when the MPP was in its final stages of development. Like you said, it was a little baby. So when I was looking at different courses, this was one of the options that was coming up, and I was reading and listening a lot about it. And I really liked the structure of the course, particularly that combination of the 4th and 5th year was really appealing to me. And also that 5+1 pathway, because it meant that I was able to combine that theory and study with the hands-on experience, which I feel is really important for learning and development as a clinician.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, that diversity of the subjects and all the different topics that were covered was also very appealing. And I felt that they were a perfect mix of that theory and the preparation for going into practice.
Yeah. Excellent. So thinking back to your time in the course, what was your experience in it? How did you find it?
I really enjoyed my time overall in the MPP, despite starting out mostly online, thanks to COVID. The classes were really fun and engaging from the beginning of our first semester. So I was, pleasantly surprised by that application of content in lectures to real life. So having that connection and being able to understand interventions and theories was made so much clearer through real world cases and examples. Our assignments were not just another task to get done, but there were great opportunities to learn and practice some of the things that are important to know and do in professional practice. I heard you talking about the case formulations and MSEs that we spent a lot of time doing, and they were assignments, but they're things that I use day to day in my internship now. So that was, really, really beneficial. And the support from staff was wonderful. And you could feel that the people teaching you were also really invested in your success and learning.
Yeah, thank you. So overall, what was your highlight of the course?
The biggest highlight for me was definitely the connection with the other students and the staff that were involved in the course. It was just such a supportive environment, and I felt really lucky to be surrounded by so many like-minded people. It made classes really enjoyable, and it definitely helped us get through those assessments. And another highlight would have to be the placement subjects, so the placement 1 and 2. They were really beneficial, and again, they were a great environment for support and learning about what real life work as a psych might look like for us.
Yeah, okay. So extending from that now, how has it helped you in your internship? How are you going?
Yeah, so all that experience, like I said, the case formulations and all of that work from the placements and from the subjects throughout the MPP, what kind of all of that plus what was most important and helpful for me was the feedback, and that kind of building on my skills and getting that feedback is what helped me the most in my what's helping me now in my internship, because having input from experienced psychologists in the form of teachers and staff, that input into my work was incredibly helpful in building my knowledge and skills to go into the internship. And yeah, when I started my internship with a really great foundation of knowledge of interventions and theory that I still apply to the clients that I see today. So I'm always referring back to my notes and all the resources I gathered throughout my time in the MPP.
That's very good. So do you have any advice for applicants?
Yeah, I would say don't sell yourself short. Think of your previous work, volunteer, study, and life experience, and how these have all shaped you into the person you are today. Try to build your knowledge of what a career in psychology can look like, and most importantly, reflect on the why behind your desire to become a psychologist. I would say that's my advice. Yeah,
wonderful. Okay. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you for taking some time at the end of your clinical day today. Yeah, a real pleasure.
My pleasure. No worries, Margie.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to answer, I've got 3 questions that have come up, Adam, in the chat. Can I have a chance to just answer those?
Yeah, go for it. We've got time.
Okay. All right. So first of all, question with the Master of Professional Psychology, if you decide that you want to pursue an endorsement instead of general registration, can you complete the first year of the degree and then apply for a more specialized master's? This is a really good question. Okay, there is nothing stopping you completing the first year of the degree, and you will exit with a accredited 4th year equivalent. What that won't do is give you credit for the master. For example, if you wanted to transfer into the Master of Psychology in Clinical Psychology, you're not going to get credit for those subjects, because the first year of the Master of Psychology programs is the 5th year, and the first year of the MPP is the 4th year. Okay, so you will still be going into a 5th year if you want to leave halfway. The other question, it's not here, but can I answer it because it often comes up? We absolutely get applications from people who've done an honours program. And there is a sense that because they've done a 4th year honours program, that they might be able to step straight into the 2nd year of the MPP. That is not going to be possible, because we have developed professionally oriented subjects specifically for the MPP program in our 4th year. So it sits alongside the honours year. It's not completely overlapping. So if you've done a 4th year honours and you want to come and do our program, brilliant. Absolutely, we'll take you, but you'll have a very much lighter load. You'll still have some subjects to do in the 1st year before going into the 2nd year of the MPP. Okay, can you please clarify the difference between a general psychologist and a clinical psychologist? Clinical psychologists typically work with more severe clinical presentations, more severe mental health issues. Generalist psychologists, we absolutely, if there is a crisis point, if someone is presenting with you in front of you with a crisis, we absolutely have the same skills in order to deal with it and help them through it. But typically, generalist psychologists work with more mild to moderate presentations. And that is a broad summary. But we absolutely, within each generalist or clinical track, we have specializations that we move into and you get known for working in. And that keeps your work very interesting too. So what is the bridging pathway from registered psychologist after doing MPP to becoming a clinical psychologist? Really good question. So at University of Melbourne, at our school, we have a graduate diploma in clinical psychology. That is for people who are generally registered, who've achieved general registration, to then step across and do training that will prepare them for the clinical endorsement track. What you won't be able to do, it's the general registration that's the real important point to remember here. At the end of the MPP, you're finishing a 5th year. You still need to do the +1. You still need to do a 6th year of training, sit the National Psychology exam, then you're generally registered, and then you can do a bridging graduate diploma of clinical psychology, for example. There's a question for Sonia, but she seems to have left us. Hi, Sonia. How are you managing your internship workload and preparation? Really good question. I'm sure she's doing it extremely well because she's very organized. But that's a good question. I actually have found out from a couple of our students. So they are sitting in their +1 year now, our first graduates. And some have started to sit the exam already. So you don't necessarily have to wait that whole year. If you accumulate your hours and your training and you feel strongly enough that you're prepared, you can sit the exam before, the very end of the year. Another question has popped up. Adam, hang on. Can graduates of the MPP complete assessments for clients? What sort of assessments are included? WPATH and what else? We do in our program provide training in the Wechsler tests. So the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, oh gosh, this is getting me now. The core Wechsler tests that form part of the National Psychology exam, we teach. Other assessments you will learn about, you would need to learn about in your internship and through additional supervision. So the main Wechsler tests are covered in our program in the 2nd year. So that is all for me in terms of questions. Adam, I think I'll hand back to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Margaret. So I would like to, as we close, I would like to just give a word of thanks to everybody, to Cassie, Natalia, and Margaret for helping out with this. I also want to close on, talking about why psychology is a rewarding career. I think it's just a really great way to think about, there's a lot of different reasons why it can be rewarding. I think if you like thinking about how people work, it's a really great thing to be in psychology. If you're interested in helping people, it's also a great thing to be involved with. And if either of these are things that are interesting to you, please consider taking your psychology studies further with one of our programs. And I'd also like to thank everybody for attending. And I hope this was helpful in thinking about your journey forward in psychology. I would also like to emphasize that a recording will be available of this. So I think that will be emailed out tomorrow. And aside from that, thank you very much and hope you enjoy your night. Take care, everybody.